Good morning, Idaho. Hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. A little bit of a shorter episode this week, but still some really good stuff. We'll be talking about the grand opening of In-N-Out in Idaho and a report from the Idaho Freedom Foundation regarding education freedom in the state. Hey, glad to have you here today. Please join us for the morning banter where we chat a little bit with you before we get into it. But I understand if you're short on time and prefer to skip the banter, I know we all got busy lives, you can use the timestamp that is down in the description to jump straight over to the stories. For those that stayed, thank you for staying for the morning banter. I know I quite enjoy it and it's a fun time to have with you all. I hope you all had a wonderful week. I know mine... Hey, it's not over yet. It's busy, but between Christmas and heading up north this week, everything is just a blur. But before I get into any more of that, John, my editor, is co-hosting with me today, and glad as always to have him.
Yeah, I am here. It's been a good week. It's short. We're recording this one early, but it's been a good week so far. Busy, but that seems to be a way of things these days, which is good.
Right? Yeah, I mean, end of the year, I swear that's what starts happening. It gets very busy, very short. You have that. That's like the last gasp of that year trying to get out. It's like, I want this, I want to do that. And so it just gets crazy. Hands down for me, I feel like the two busiest months are December and May, and I'm just about through one of them.
Yeah. Christmas time gets to be a crazy time of year.
Yeah, lots of fun things to do, a lot of enjoyment to have. Granted, maybe you felt this, John, but like you have all the busyness for December and Christmas, and then you hit January, and it's like shell shock almost, because you've been so busy, there's been so much hype or excitement, and then all of a sudden you hit the month after, and it's like, what happened?
Huh? Yeah, man, I am with you there. It does get crazy.
Yeah, I got into work at 9, and then I got off work at probably like 8:20, 8:30 or whatever is when I got off. So, bit of a long day, but mainly most of that has to do with the fact that I'm going to be going up north. I kind of teased that last week to go see a friend. So, I'm looking forward to seeing all the beautiful snow up there. Speaking of like Christmassy things, anyone that's listened for enough length of time, I love the snow, and northern Idaho has plenty of it.
I'm kind of jealous of you. Yeah, we've talked about it before. I also like snow, and that's just I don't know, that sounds like a good time to me.
Yeah, it's like going into winter wonderland. I will say, as weird as it sounds, that like once winter happens, I don't travel very far north in Idaho. I know I could probably do it, but most of the time I have a Corolla, and so I kind of try to stay in the valley. Could I get away with it? Probably, but there's that added worry or concern when you're far away from what you're familiar in the logistics thereof. But it'll be cool. I think this will be the first time I've been up towards like the Moscow, Lewiston area in the winter. I've always seen it in like the fall and the spring, and I've seen it in the summer, but I haven't seen it during the winter.
Yeah, no, that'll be cool. I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see the pictures and stuff that come back with you. That'll be cool.
Because they always do. Gives me excuse. Someone's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm practicing. Thank you very much. Just more. I have all this fun toys. Why not use it?
Yeah, I mean... You have to. Otherwise, how will you know how you can actually use them?
The excuse of every business owner ever. Like, yeah. If I have a company about motorbikes, I have to go take it out for a drive for a little bit on the back roads and different things. I got to try it out for the customer, right? Yeah.
Right? It's all for the customer.
Always, 100%. But have you, in the busyness, speaking of Christmas, have you gotten all the Christmas presents? Or are you still in that scramble trying to find those last minute ones or hoping that shipping will get it here on time?
So this is where I give my wife tons of props. She is amazing when it comes to presents and having them and things like that. So I have done next to nothing, and I'm pretty sure we have all of the Christmas gifts except for one. We're planning on buying a Switch for our family this year, a Nintendo Switch. And so that's on my plate, but I'm coordinating with her folks who are wanting to chip in for some stuff. So nice. I still need to figure out all of those details. But yeah, it's very exciting.
I've heard a lot of people talk a lot about the Nintendo Switch and different stuff, and I've seen it, and I know the kids and different young people. Have you toyed with it too much? What's kind of the magic behind it? It just seems like they keep flying off the shelf.
Well, the magic behind it is, one, it's a Nintendo system, and those have always been great family systems. Like, Nintendo has gotten it right when it comes to like family type games. So there's that. And then the Switch also does the motion control things that the Wii did. So, the little nunchucks are also motion control sensors. So you have games that do all of the things that the Wii did, but it's also a more powerful system. So it can handle having 8 players play simultaneously. So you can play Mario Kart with 8 people on the same TV screen. So it's one of those things where it seems like it's taking the things that Nintendo consoles have done well in the past and just continuing to do them well.
Right. I mean, I feel like with Nintendo and a lot of their games, they have done a really good job, as weird as it sounds, making video games board game-like. And what I mean by that is that, like, Mario Kart, it's not as much about the game, it's more about the experiences you have with it. And so it's almost become like the digital board game world of the family, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that is one of the things that makes the Nintendo ecosystem so amazing, is that they have doubled down on making games that are family friendly, I guess.
Family friendly or timeless. I will say for myself, the only console I've ever liked is the Wii. And there's one main reason, which is I hate the input controls for most consoles. Vividly.
All right.
Well, because when I play games, my brain, here again, coming back to young childhood, right? I have most of my life, anything I've had to do with computers involves a mouse and a keyboard. That's why I really enjoyed the Wii, because the Wii was the closest thing with a console that was like keyboard, because you had that right-hand controller, the stick, that was like a mouse or something, right, that you used. And then the left hand was your command and controls just like a keyboard. And anytime I pick up a Wii, it's instantaneous, rather than if I have to pick up an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, there's just, it doesn't work for me. The learning curve is too high.
I can understand that. The funny thing is, I'm the other way. I have a really hard time playing mouse and keyboard. The last time I played a mouse and keyboard game was Half-Life 2.
Really?
Which is going back to when I was in college.
That blows my brain. The idea. Oh.
I'm the opposite. When you put me on a keyboard, I am trash.
And see, this is where the superiority of PC gaming comes in, because you can have a friend and I can have my keyboard and they can have their controller and we can actually play at our best efficiency and see who's actually the best. Haha. I've had that many a time. But any case, keeping the podcast on the rails, we went from Christmas to very in-depth video game kind of jargon. We'll move on to the news. Starting off with our first news story, In-N-Out Burger makes it to Idaho, debut in Meridian. This comes by several sources. In-N-Out Burger, the popular California-based chain, has finally opened its doors in Meridian at 3520 East Fairview Avenue. The grand opening took place on December 12th, with operating hours from 10:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. Sundays through Thursday until 1:30 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. This marks the 400th location for the franchise, and fans of the iconic burger joint can now enjoy their favorite meals without leaving the state. With the opening of the Meridian location, local authorities and the village at Meridian prepared for the inevitable surge in traffic and long lines. The Ada County Highway District, ACHD, as you all know, worked closely with the restaurant and the Idaho Transportation Department to plan signal timing adjustments for the event. To further mitigate traffic issues, the village at Meridian implemented a car stacking plan utilizing 4 large, recently paved lots on the west side of the property. This grid light pattern was aimed to keep the long single-file lines from spilling onto roadways. In-N-Out has also brought over its 200 all-star team members to assist with the opening and help manage traffic flow. Despite these efforts, customers experienced long wait times during the initial opening, with even more waiting overnight in anticipation. Lines of cars snaked through the village parking lot, while pedestrians formed queues extending out of the building and onto the sidewalk. In-N-Out COO Denny Warnick expressed gratitude for the warm welcome from the community and acknowledged the dedication of their first drive-thru customers who arrived 30 hours before the opening. As the excitement around Idaho's first In-N-Out burgers continued, additional locations are being considered in Boise and Nampa. For now, residents and visitors can enjoy the famous double burgers and animal-style fries at the Meridian location, while local authorities and the village at Meridian continue to monitor and manage traffic and crowds. Which I posted something on Twitter. I haven't gotten my hand slapped for it yet, but I posted change my mind. I think it's crazy for any burger to sit outside of any restaurant overnight to be the first person to have that burger. I think that is crazy, but you do you. I will admit I will be ending up going and visiting. I would have done it this week, but I swear this week just was crazy, and obviously In-N-Out had to do this in the middle of the Christmas season when I'm also slammed and busy. Granted, I think that's like any time, but definitely it's going to be busy there for a little bit. I know everyone I've heard has been chatting about it and asking me questions about it, and I've had to share that info and be kind of that source for all that, which I love and I enjoy. But I know it's something that's been very popular. And side note, this, for all the wonderful adopted Californians that we've had here in Idaho, I can't help but sharing this joke that someone told me, which was first day to people at In-N-Out, all going to be Californians. Where the Idahoans? They'll be there about 1 to 2 weeks later once the crowds have disappeared.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I have never understood. So I lived in Albuquerque when Chipotle came to Albuquerque. And it blew my mind. Chipotle is a Mexican food restaurant, I guess American Mexican. But on every street corner, there's a restaurant that makes burritos. And they make them in a New Mexican style. And they have green chili and sauce. And, they're just yummy. And then they opened a Chipotle, and there were lines that circled the building twice. And I remember even talking to my coworkers, and they were all like, "Yeah, Chipotle's here. We're so excited. We're going to go there." And I was like, "Why? Just go to Twister's or
any of the other local places.
Go to any of the other places." I didn't get it. And that was just, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the idea of sitting in a line for that long to get a hamburger. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's worth, what did you say, a 30-hour wait?
Well, what was it here? My script here. I think it was that people showed up 30 hours before, be ready to fit into the car line or whatever. But what I was hearing from people was 3 hours.
That's insane.
2 to 3 hours in the drive-through lane.
Man alive. More power, I guess, to people, but goodness gracious, that's insane.
I also saw my coworker. He was looking on Facebook Marketplace, and he leaned over and showed me on his phone. He's like, "Hey, someone went and bought 20 burgers, and they're selling them on Facebook Marketplace, so you can get them right now without having to go through the line."
Oh, that's awesome. That's hilarious.
The encouraging thing is it will die down. Like most things, the excitement, I know right now it's very, very high. But my forecast, ladies and gentlemen, is that you will be able to go to In-N-Out and drive through in a reasonable amount of time in 1.5 to 2 weeks, I think. I think by then, everyone that's got that In-N-Out itch will have finally been like, yeah, I've had enough In-N-Out, or something of that variation, and it will be a lot more reasonable. Either that, or we'll just have to wait for the other 2 locations to open, which I didn't go into detail in the article, but for those that haven't heard the past podcast, there's one that's planned on going in over at the Karcher exit, kind of there by the Habit, which is another delicious burger chain, which I regularly go to, and is actually really affordable. You can get a double patty, one of their double patty burgers that looks really good. It's a great burger. And you can get it, I think, with fries and a drink, and it's under $10, and it's way, way better than McDonald's or Burger King. But anywho, they'll be in the same parking lot competing, so have mercy on Habit, I hope. And then they're also going to be putting one over by the Boise Mall just across the railroad tracks, so you will be able to sit there and eat your Chick-fil-A and see the In-N-Out from the same parking lot.
I mean, I guess that makes sense.
Now, moving on from food-related things and over to education-related things, I'm actually going to let John read this, mainly because my voice is about ready to die, so I'm going to hand it over to him here so that we can make sure to get through this episode without me sounding like a true old man.
So this is The Decline of Education Freedom in Idaho, and this comes by the Idaho Freedom Foundation by Ronald M. Nate, Ph.D. The Heritage Foundation recently updated its education freedom rankings, and the results for Idaho are concerning. Idaho's overall ranking for education freedom has dropped 8 spots from number 3 in 2022 to number 11 in 2023. The Education Choice ranking shows a similar decline, down 9 spots in 1 year. This drop is not due to any new restrictive laws or policies in Idaho, but rather because other states have been proactive in expanding education freedom, while Idaho's legislature has opposed measures to enhance education choice. In 2023, the Idaho legislature rejected Senate Bill S-1038, which would have moved Idaho closer to the successful education choice models of Arizona and West Virginia. They also rejected a more modest education choice bill, Senate Bill S-1161, proposed by Senator Den Hartog. Idaho's ranking for transparency also dropped, as the state has done little to increase parents' access to classrooms and knowledge about their children's school activities. The state also failed to pass a sex education opt-in bill, which would have increased parental involvement in their children's education. Teacher freedom is another area where Idaho is lagging, ranking number 23. This is due to the state's adherence to Common Core and its lack of full teacher licensing reciprocity with other states. Despite these challenges, Idaho maintains its number 1 ranking for return on investment, likely due to the state's low cost of living and students' decent performance, despite the constraints of the public school system. In conclusion, Idaho has work to do to increase education freedom, enhance parents' ability to choose better options without paying twice, and increase teacher freedom. It's time to unleash a competitive school model that fosters innovation and improves student performance.
On this specific story, I took the liberty of creating some more robust notes for our discussion so that we can kind of dive through this and have some added resources to our fingertips and maybe keep this a little bit more on the rails, because we have a habit of rambling and going all over the place. With that said, I know we here in Idaho, especially on the homeschooling side, are very thankful for how free and open Idaho has been with that, allowing many of us to be homeschooled. But with that said, to kind of give some added context on the story, and did kind of some deeper research specifically on those 2 bills and a couple other points. Senate Bill 1038 was introduced in the Idaho legislature this year and was aimed to establish a Universal Education Saving Act, or SCA. This was a program that would have provided about $5,950 in scholarships to students who were homeschooled or attending non-public schools. The whole program was kind of for stuff for scholarships that could also be used for private school tuition. So even if you didn't have the kids at home, but they weren't in public school, you could take those benefits and use them for fees and uniforms and textbooks and other education-related expenses. Some senators on it argued that it wasn't adequate for tax dollars or students' outcomes due to the public school. Public school has standardized testing and different stuff, rather than homeschooling doesn't, which to that I counter, partly if you go out and look at Homeschool Idaho, which I've done this for many years when I was growing up being homeschooled. They offer standardized testing that you can go do, and a lot of homeschool families go and do that. And then those different readings of those standardized tests, which are the same ones the public school is doing, and we've talked about this earlier, we are taken to the legislature to show them. And 9 times out of 10, as public schoolers, we really crush those standardized tests, even compared to public school standards. And so that's why you've seen a lot of the freedom for homeschooling in Idaho, is when different senators like, oh yeah, we're going to vote against this. And then they looked at it and be like, wait a second, I'm voting no for families that even by the public school standards are really excelling. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I would counter that one objection there a little bit. Anywho, that bill for that program, it got kind of shot down. There was only 12 in favor, 23 against. So if you have an elected representative out there and you didn't like that, might want to go look that up. You can just type in the Senate bill, and in the Idaho legislature's journals, it'll show who voted yay or nay. So you can kind of look into that if you want for this next upcoming election cycle. Also on that Senate bill 1161 that they also did was aimed to amend, repeal, and add to existing law to revise provisions regarding empowering parents program and to provide for tuition grants. If you guys remember listening to me, if you've been here through the whole length of the show, you'll know I've gotten that first part down really good because you have no idea how many times I've read bills and they all start roughly that way. It's just crazy. It comes second nature at this point, which maybe is a good thing. I don't know. But anywho, the goal of it was to empower parents and others to have micro grants for them related to education expenses. So kind of similar to the first one, the bill proposed to expand the program to include transportation to and from schools as an allowed expense for micro grants. The bill was introduced on March 10th. It passed the Senate March 16th and with a vote of 19-15. It was then referred to the House Education Committee. However, the bill did not progress further. It was held on the desks. So my best guess is it ran out of time is best answer there on that one. And then there was the opt-in program for sex education, which when I first heard that, I was like, I don't quite understand what that is. And basically, there again, giving context, the Idaho legislature has tried to change the current opt-out policy for sex education to an opt-in policy. Currently, as it stands right now, the current opt-out policy, parents and guardians can file a written request to the school board to remove their children from sex education instruction. However, the changed proposal proposed an opt-in policy, which would require parents to give explicit consent for their children to participate in sex education classes, which I know you kind of lean on the more libertarian side of it, John, and kind of to get you in here because I've been kind of just on ahead. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
All right. So we'll do the sex education first because that's the one that you just talked about. And then I want to roll back to the two earlier Senate bills. So the sex education thing, I think it makes a lot more sense to have the opt-in option instead of you can actively opt or you can opt out. I'm torn on sex education in the public schools.
Right.
Just by nature, I think that's something that should be handled by parents. But I mean, I understand needing to talk about biology and, hey, this is, if you're talking, if you're doing anatomy and physiology, you're going to talk about human anatomy at some point. And, if we talk about one of the biggest problems that we have in society right now is the perversion of the human body.
And its nature.
And so the question is, well, yeah, and it's nature, but the perversion of how we relate to the human body and how we look at the human body, we infatuate over it in wrong ways. And so I don't know. There's more thinking to be done on sex education as a whole. But something, if I had my kids in the public school system, an opt-in policy, I would much appreciate, I guess, especially with all the stuff that's come out over the last 3 years with teachers teaching all kinds of random things, we'll say. And I'm not necessarily talking about Idaho specific, but
just in general.
But it's just in general. There are a lot of teachers who are teaching a lot of things that are not great. And that's not saying all teachers. If you're a teacher out there hearing me and you teach great things, great, good for you. Good job. You're doing your job. That's good. There are teachers out there who are indoctrinating, and that's a problem. So that's my thoughts on sex education opt-in. It makes sense. So the other one, S1038, this is the Education Savings Account program. It's the school choice bill. Yeah. And this the whole idea of school choice, and I've gone round and round with my wife on this one because she is very against school choice being a thing. And here's why. When you take tax money from the government then have a hold over you to say, well, we gave you money, prove to us that you are doing with that money what you ought to be doing.
Right.
Or we gave you money, these are the things you must be teaching. And so when government money is taken, strings are always attached. So I don't know. I go back and forth on this one. I don't know what the right solution is.
Well, maybe don't look at it as a final solution, but look at it as a step. That there's a lot of times within politics and policies, and I've learned this more and more as I've gotten into it and just enjoy the topic, that sometimes you have an end goal with your policy of what you want to do, but you take baby steps in it. I can see this as kind of being a step bill that they're like, hey, here's a step, here's some money, we'll take a certain cut out of it. The preferable thing would be not to take that cut, but then again, politics is, it's stepping stones oftentimes.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And this is where, again, going back to when I was talking with my wife about this, so there were kind of there was one school of thought in both of those, and that was, this bill is bad, write your senators and people and tell them not to vote for it. And so people did. And my statement to my wife was, well, that's great that we don't want bad legislation. The problem is that bad legislation is going to pass if it sounds good unless there's another alternative. So what I really wish would happen is that instead of just saying, this bill bad, vote no, I really wish people would work on an alternative solution. And I don't know what that would be, because I don't think about this thing all day, but there are a lot of people that do. So what's another solution? Write that bill, get a senator, get a group of representatives or senators, or however that process works, get with those people, get a bill written, and get something else out there to be like, look, vote no for that, but vote yes for this one, and start giving some options. It goes back to conversations we were having with the elections recently, where Masterson was standing only against McLean. He wasn't standing for anything. And that's where I saw a lot of the opposition to this Senate bill, was everyone was just saying, no, down with that bill, it's bad. But if you can't stand for something and you're saying, hey, down with this, but for this is the way to go, do this instead, man, again, you're not going to move forward with anything if all you're going to say is, no, change bad, don't change. Because obviously we have a broken system, and you can't fix a broken system by saying, no, the broken system is fine, we just want it to stay as is. If someone's proposing solutions, someone's going to vote for solutions, because solutions are trying to solve the problem at least.
Yeah, that whole last bit there will be the death of the Republican Party. Part of it, of being a conservative, is preserving and conserving, right? There is a definite part of that and has a place. But in recent years, in modern years, it will be the death of conservatives either saying, keep the status quo, or just being the guys that say, no, 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 and they just slow things down. And that's all we do. No one likes the guy in the room that's just always slowing it down in the decision making. But the people who really are liked in the room, granted, the psychopaths don't like them, are the people who are like, hey, here's this idea. Let me work with you. Oh, let's compromise on this. Let's work here. That are trying to they have a vision. They have an idea for a future. And that vision keeps proving itself out to be a good one, a beneficial one for all parties involved. And so if you want to have successful policy at an individual level and overall level, you need a vision. You need an idea of what your end goal is. Now, that might be in baby steps, right? I was mentioning earlier to you, but you need to figure out a way to communicate that. And I will agree. I think I feel kind of alone in that. I remember when I was watching it a little bit from the sidelines and getting my legs a little bit, I thought it was a perfectly fine step, if that makes sense. Not the end goal, of course. I don't think it should stop there. But I was like, no, I think this is a pretty decent answer to just say, hey, we're getting an X amount of money from taxes already for your school stuff. How about we just take some of that, give it back to you? Could strings be attached to it later? Yes, but that's politics. You're never going to get it right. And you need to stand up and fight and be involved in these things. And thankfully, you can in America. It'd be a different thing if you said, oh yeah, the king wants to pass this or whatever. I would have been like, okay, no, because I can't affect that. What will then end up coming out of that can of worms. But since we live in a representative democracy, I can. So yes, let's move forward with this. Let's try new things. Let's experiment, and have a free market of ideas. Also on that, and coming kind of full circle, kind of our second point back again, the argument for the sex education opt-in, opt-out type of thing. The only argument I was able to find, and I kind of tried to put it down here and summarize it, and I'll do my best, that I heard for it was basically, well, that just makes it hard for teachers. And it makes more time for them to sign people up and try to let them know it's an available resource and basically boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. And I'm like, that's not an argument. Just because something takes more work doesn't mean it's not the reason we should do a thing. Maybe in a business where it's you lose more money doing things, I guess so. But sometimes the thing that's right takes work and it takes effort and it's not fun and it's not convenient for you, right? So you've kind of,
Yeah.
you've already made yourself sound childish. You've done it in really, really beautiful language, like reading my thing here that's like the PR one. People against it, that the policy would deny students access to critical, needed sex education curriculum and create logistical hurdles for parents and teachers, arguing that the opt-in policy presents an unnecessary barrier for receiving sex education. That PR thing, which to me just translates to me, it's more work, I don't want to do it. And rather than the counter argument, actually, like we talked about and we're just talking about, was actually a vision of the future saying it is necessary to increase parental involvement in educational decision and to protect children from graphical sexual content in the classroom, which continues to keep seeping in. That is a vision. That is an answer. The other is, I don't want to do my work, which is just bad. I'll just leave it at that there.
Yeah, it's true, though. We as Americans are shockingly lazy.
Anyway, off my soapbox, that kind of wraps us up for the stories there. Thank you for listening to the entire podcast. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email at localyokelidaho2022@gmail.com or on Twitter by tweeting me at localyokelidaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.